Imagine living in a world where you have no idea what your great-grandfather looked like. Imagine a world where memories just disappear. Before George Eastman, if you wanted a picture of your family, you had to hire a professional with a giant, scary machine and a bag of explosive powder. It cost a fortune and took all day. But then, a young bank clerk who was tired of carrying 50 pounds of equipment just to take one vacation photo decided he was going to change human memory forever. George Eastman had a dream that was so simple, it sounded like a toy. George Eastman wanted to make a camera that could fit in your pocket. George Eastman wanted to make photography as easy as breathing. George Eastman was not just an inventor. He was the man who taught the world how to smile. He found a way to capture time itself and sell it in a small yellow box. This is the story of how a man who never finished high school built a billion-dollar empire called Kodak, and then, at the height of his power, did something so shocking that it left the entire world in silence. He didn't just build a company, he built the eyes of the human race. George Eastman grew up poor. His father died when he was young, and he watched his mother struggle to survive by taking in boarders at their house. This made him obsessed with money and hard work. He started working at a bank, counting every penny. When he was 24, he planned a vacation to Santo Domingo. A friend told him he should take a camera to record the trip. George bought the equipment, but it was a nightmare. He had to carry a camera as big as a microwave, a heavy tripod, jars of dangerous chemicals, and glass plates. He realized he didn't need a vacation. He needed a better way to take pictures. He spent every night in his mother's kitchen, mixing chemicals until he fainted from the fumes. He was looking for a way to get rid of the heavy glass plates. He wanted dry plates. While everyone else was sleeping, George was inventing the future of history. He eventually found a way to put the chemicals on a flexible roll of film. This was the wealth secret that changed everything. He realized that the money wasn't in the camera. The money was in the film that people had to keep buying forever. In 1888, George Eastman released a product that changed the world, the Kodak camera. It was a small wooden box, and it was revolutionary. Before this, you had to be a scientist to take a photo. But with George's invention, he gave the world a famous promise. You press the button, we do the rest. This was the first time in history that a complicated technology was made simple for everyone. The camera came preloaded with enough film for 100 pictures. When you were done, you didn't have to mess with chemicals. You just mailed the whole camera back to George's factory in Rochester, New York. They would develop the photos, put in a new roll of film, and mail the camera and the prints back to you. It was pure magic for the people of that time. He named the company Kodak because he liked the letter K. He said it was a strong, sharp letter that people would remember. He was a master of branding before branding was even a word. The Kodak camera became a global craze. Suddenly, everyone was a Kodaker. People were taking pictures of their dogs, their babies, and their dinners. This was the birth of the snapshot. Professional photographers hated him. They said he was ruining the art of photography by making it too easy. But George didn't care about art. He cared about the masses. He realized that there are millions of regular people and only a few thousand artists. By focusing on the regular person, he created a monopoly that lasted for almost 100 years. He was making so much money that he began to build giant factories that looked like cities. But George was a very private man. Even though his name was everywhere, nobody knew what he looked like. He could walk through his own factory and his workers wouldn't recognize him. He didn't want fame. He wanted efficiency. He was a quiet king who ruled through the lens of a camera. George Eastman was one of the first people to use a business trick called the razor and blade strategy. He sold his cameras at a very low price, sometimes even losing money, just so people would own them. Why? Because once you owned a Kodak camera, you had to buy Kodak film, and you had to buy Kodak paper, and you had to pay Kodak to develop the photos. He made a small profit on the machine, but a massive, never-ending profit on the supplies. This is the same way companies like HP sell printers today, or how Sony sells PlayStations. George was 100 years ahead of his time. He turned a one-time purchase into a lifelong subscription. He became a billionaire by selling pieces of plastic coated in silver. He was obsessed with the quality of his film. If a single batch was bad, he would shut down the whole factory and replace it all for free. He knew that trust was his most valuable product. Image showing a comparison between a Kodak camera and the rolls of film it requires as his wealth grew. George became one of the greatest givers in history. He didn't have a wife or children. So he treated his company and his city like his family. He gave away over $100 million during his life, which would be billions today. He built hospitals, dental clinics for children, and famous music schools. He even gave money to schools for black students at a time when most rich white men wouldn't even look at them. He was a pioneer in profit sharing. He believed that if the company made money, the workers should too. He gave them bonuses and built them beautiful parks. But he was also a man of strict routine. Every day was the same. Every meal was timed. He lived in a giant mansion with a pipe organ that played every morning while he ate breakfast. He was a man who had captured everyone else's life on film, but his own life was very lonely and very controlled. While George was busy making everyone a photographer, another industry was being born that would make him even richer: the movies. When inventors like Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers wanted to make moving pictures, they needed miles and miles of flexible film. Only one man in the world could make it at that scale: George Eastman. Every movie from the early days of Hollywood was shot on Kodak film. Every time a movie theater sold a ticket, George Eastman got a piece of the action. He was the secret engine behind the entire entertainment industry. He moved from just capturing a moment to capturing motion. His factories were now running 24 hours a day, churning out millions of feet of film. He had successfully cornered the market on human vision. If it was recorded on Kodak. But as the world changed, George began to feel the weight of his age. He had spent his whole life building a machine that never stopped. He had no family to go home to. He began to suffer from a painful disease that made it hard for him to walk. For a man who was always moving, always working, and always in control, the idea of being stuck in a chair was a nightmare. He watched his friends die, and he saw his own body failing him. He began to plan his exit with the same cold, calculated efficiency he used to build Kodak. He didn't want to wait for the end to come to him. He wanted to be the one to press the final button. He spent his final days putting his papers in order, making sure every cent of his money was going to the right place, and saying goodbye to his closest friends without them even knowing it was a goodbye. On March 14, 1932, George Eastman invited his friends over for a meeting. He was 77 years old. He was polite and calm, just like always. After they left, he sat down at his desk and wrote a very short note. It didn't say he was sad. It didn't say he was scared. It was the note of a businessman who had finished his work. The note said, "To my friends, my work is done. Why wait?" He then took a gun and ended his own life. The world was in shock. The man who had given everyone the ability to save their memories had decided his own memory was complete. He left his entire fortune to charity. He died as he lived on his own terms, with perfect timing and without any mess. He had turned the snapshot into a final shot. The news of his death was on the front page of every newspaper in the world. People couldn't understand why a man with so much money and so much respect would do such a thing. But for those who knew George, it made sense. He was a man of logic. He saw that his health was gone and his company was safe. In his mind, there was no reason to stay on the stage if the play was over. He was a pioneer even in death. He had built a legacy that would last for decades after he was gone. Kodak would go on to become one of the most powerful brands in the world, capturing the moon landing, world wars, and billions of family birthdays. The Kodak moment became a part of the human language. George Eastman was gone, but his yellow boxes were in every cabinet in the world. George Eastman's story is a beautiful but tragic lesson. He built an empire that was so successful that it eventually became blind. Many years after his death, Kodak engineers actually invented the very first digital camera. But the bosses at Kodak were so obsessed with George's old wealth secrets selling physical film that they hid the digital camera because they were afraid it would hurt their film sales. They forgot George's true lesson: if the technology changes, you must change with it. Because they stayed stuck in the past, the giant empire George built eventually went bankrupt. The company that taught the world how to see became blind to the future. But even though the company failed, George Eastman's impact is everywhere. Every time you take a photo with your smartphone, you are using the snapshot culture he created. George Eastman showed us that you don't need a fancy education to change the world. You just need to solve a problem that everyone has. He took a complicated, heavy, and expensive science and turned it into a simple button. He made the invisible visible. He gave the poor the same power as the rich, the power to remember. He was the man who turned life into a roll of film and showed us that a single moment can last forever. His life was a series of perfect exposures, developed with hard work and finished with a clear ending. He was the king of the yellow box, the master of the lens, and the architect of our memories. If you think it is amazing how a man built an empire out of a small wooden box and some film, wait until you see how the next inventor used the power of invisible waves to talk to people on the other side of the planet. Click the next video to see the secret of the man who invented the phone and started the communication revolution.